Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to this podcast in which we delve into individual horror films every week. I know that's something that you might hear a lot of from a lot of other podcasts, but we kind of do it a little bit differently because I like to make it a conversation type of podcast. So what ends up happening is I bring on a guest. I have a rotating list of guests, and we kind of sometimes we rewatch the movie for critical analysis, and sometimes we just watch the movie because we have never seen it, and other times we don't rewatch the movies because we are huge fans of them. Of the movies that we don't like, I try not to rewatch them, but sometimes, like in the case of today's movie, I do have to rewatch them because my original thoughts on them are not so good. That being said, I want to thank you for joining us this month as we delve deep into some of the comic book horror themed movies out there. We wanted to take a special look at some of the comic book movies because comic book movies are very popular, and they are very popular this year, as though there's going to be a plethora of them at the box office. And what better time to delve into comic book horror movies than right now? So the movie we are going to be talking about today is the original first Ghost Rider movie starring Nicolas Cage. And to talk about this movie with me is Philip Ray, who loves these type of films, not just horror films, but also comic book films. So we're going to get some insight into that from his perspective. Thank you, Philip, for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So I know a lot of people out there are wondering why we're doing Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is not a horror film. No, it's not typically a horror film. But I do like to take into account that there are a lot of horror elements in some of these comic book based movies. And there are a lot of them in this film because, in a sense, this is a movie about the devil's son, and the devil's mercenary / assassin, which is the Ghost Rider. So I think it fits pretty well into our wheelhouse. And there's a lot of crazy visuals in this film that would denote it being, at least on the surface, a horror themed film, especially if you have read the comic books. There have been darker versions of the character, which is the Danny Ketch version, which was in the 90s, which is when I read Ghost Rider. But the film Ghost Rider, starring Nicolas Cage, decides to go back to the original Ghost Rider, which was Johnny Blaze. So, Philip, I have to have your impressions on this movie before I tell everyone my impressions on this movie. What are your impressions of this movie?
So, Ghost Rider. So my first intro with the character Ghost Rider, I was in my first introduction with the character was Marvel Ultimate Alliance. It's a video game on the PS2. It had a lot of Marvel characters, and Ghost Rider was one of them. And I thought he was obviously a boy, a character with a flaming skull, pretty badass. So I was very interested in the character after that. And then this movie came out, and I was very interested in the movie when I heard it was coming out. Actually, at the time, I had not watched a lot of Nicolas Cage's movies before then. This movie was actually really, other than this and the National Treasure, was my introduction to the Nicolas Cage as an actor. So that being said, what are my thoughts about the movie? I am going to be controversial, and I actually like a lot of this movie. I actually really, there are problems with the movie, understandable, but there's a lot about the movie that I still think holds up to this day and is way better than its god-awful sequel, Spirit of Vengeance. So...
I grew up reading in the 90s the Danny Ketch version of this, and then going back and reading some of the Johnny Blaze versions of this when they did, like, when Marvel used to do reprints, when they had when they revamped the character, and the new version was always popular. They'd always go back and republish some of the older comic books. And I read some of the older comic books with Johnny Blaze. Never a fan of Johnny Blaze. That character I never liked as Ghost Rider. I didn't like the character Johnny Blaze till he became part of the whole Midnight Suns thing, which, if you've been following the MCU and all the rumors of them trying to do the Midnight Suns and all that kind of crap, that version of Blaze is the only Blaze I liked because he's not a Ghost Rider. He just has the power of the Ghost Rider, which you would see more of in this film through these Sam Elliott character, the caretaker, who I won't reveal his real name because it's part of the joy of watching the movie. This movie itself sold me mostly on the fact that Ghost Rider is like the one character that I never thought they'd ever make into a movie. Like as badass as he was in the 90s with the darker Danny Ketch version of this, you never ever would have thought they'd make this movie, this comic book into a movie, much less from the guy who fucked up Daredevil in the Daredevil movie. I hate that movie. I know there's some people out there who like the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck. I kind of hated that fucking movie. I am one of those people who like the Elektra movie more than I like the Daredevil movie because I couldn't stand the Daredevil movie. But they gave this because it was financially successful. They gave him the reins. I can't remember the director's name, but they gave him the reins to do Ghost Rider. So I had to go see it because Ghost Rider has always been one of my favorite. Next to Spider-Man, he's always been like my top tier Marvel character. So I saw the movie. Immediately got the whole fucking Nicolas Cage trying to channel Elvis Presley in there. Hated it. Hated everything he was doing in the movie when I originally saw it. I was like so far against that performance that it clouded my judgment on everything else. I always hated the movie, despite the fact that it had Ghost Rider, and that was any scene without Nicolas Cage, I actually thought was good. When they put him on the scene as as Elvis Ghost Rider, I was like, dude, this is horrible. They better be glad Donald Logue was in this movie to save the scenes with him in it. Because that actor does a brilliant job even in crappy fucking movies. Jesus. But that was kind of my impression when I first saw Ghost Rider. Now, having re-seen the film with open clarity, years of hindsight, and the fact that the Elvis Presley impersonation no longer bothers me, I don't think the film was that bad. I just think I don't think Nicolas Cage was the right actor for it. To be honest with you, I just think what he was trying to do just didn't work for me. I don't think the whole movie's bad. There's some really good stuff in the movie. I just don't think he was good. What do you think about it? Because I grew up watching Nicolas Cage in a lot of movies. And, Leaving Las Vegas, I thought was one of his finest performances ever, and he deserved the Academy Award for it. And he did a lot of other movies that I really enjoyed him in. Raising Arizona. The guy has done some amazing films. But as much as he claimed to love Ghost Rider, I always thought he was miscast.
Yeah, like the thing with Nicolas Cage as Ghost Rider is the problem with the movie, with him at least, was it felt like he was trying to, and it was weird because from my understanding, a lot of the changes was his choice. He wanted to edge out the character a little bit more, like not make him so stereotypical, like gruff, like how the character is in the comics. So you see stuff like him eating jelly beans and stuff. Yeah. That was a Nicolas Cage choice to make the character not so stereotypical, rough and gruff. But you're right. I think that it does it does suffer a lot with that. Actually, other actors that were in the role, Johnny Depp was originally discussed as being the lead, along with Eric Bana before, which is funny because then Eric Bana went to instead. So he didn't make a good choice regardless. But I think, out of the choice, those are the only ones that's well known that were talked about. I think Johnny Depp would have been a better choice. I think he would have done a really good job. But I think the problem with the movie with that is, and it comes with Nicolas Cage's performance, is the movie really was trying to go PG-13, but as a soft PG-13 at times. And it goes kind of hard at some times, but it very much feels like and that goes with Nicolas Cage, is he takes the fangs out of the character a lot to try to make him not so, I guess, trying to make him a little more kid friendly to a point,
Yeah.
which Ghost Rider is not really a character you can do that with. I mean, he's a flaming skull. I'm sorry. A 5-year-old's not going to look at that character and be like, "Ooh, I want a toy of that." It's just that's not how the character is. The character's not that.
uh,
But I agree. I think Nicolas Cage is miscast. He is probably the weakest in the whole cast for the most point. But uh, when he goes when he does his Nicolas Cagey stuff, I mean that's always. I think that those parts work. But when the first half, when he is just him a tone down, like you said, Elvis, like
uh-huh.
Johnny Blaze, it's not as impactful.
And that's one of the things that I really didn't know why they went with Johnny Blaze instead of going with the more popular Danny Ketch version, anyways. The Danny Ketch version, and I can get it. They wanted a more seasoned actor, older actor. The Danny Ketch version really isn't an older character; he's a much younger character. But to go with Johnny Blaze, who is far removed from the modern day Ghost Rider, it was kind of weird to me. Um, it, but it's one of those things where what came first, Nicolas Cage or the Ghost Rider itself? I mean, I don't know who decided to, out of all the comic book Marvel properties that could have been done, that they decided to do Ghost Rider above some of the other ones. It's kind of crazy, other than the fact that he just looks cool. But then to have Nicolas Cage be like the poster boy for it was kind of weird to me. But it's just me. It's just me.
I think honestly, one thing they could have done to make the movie better is, and of course they weren't going to do it because they wanted a big actor, a big face name actor to sell the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Is the actor who plays young Johnny Blaze? I like the actor for the young Johnny Blaze. I think if they had went with like a no name like that or a not well known name, I think this definitely could have been a movie that could have made us a new star versus trying to bank on an old star.
Yeah, well, you bring that up, and I was going to bring that up too. That guy who played the younger Johnny Blaze actually would have been a really good Danny Ketch version of this, in my opinion. But I think part of that is hampered by the fact that Mephistopheles and Blackheart are essentially the two bad guys in the film. And then the Danny Ketch version, Mephistopheles isn't in the comic book nearly all that much. But Blackheart is. And I don't like the changes they did to Blackheart, despite the fact that I like the actor who plays Blackheart. I think it fits for the story that the director created. I just don't like the changes they made. And I think back then, they were a lot freer with making changes because general audiences had no idea what he was supposed to be, anyways. I mean, I think that's why they got away with so much stuff in the Daredevil movie, and it still was successful. Is because people just didn't know. General audiences didn't know. So I don't know what you thought about the actor who plays Blackheart, who I like him in other stuff. Oh,
He's okay. He was intimidating. I think the problem with Blackheart a little bit is the fact that he is, and this kind of comes with the ending, is they make him. I think if we saw, like, I understand that. Well, it was a budget thing. I know why they probably did never had him go into his demon form,
mm-hmm.
but I think if they had gone to the demon form, I think at points, like maybe he has a human appearance at times, but then he goes into his demon form at times. I think that would have helped a little bit versus him just being in human form. Honestly, I think the biggest problem with Ghost Rider and I'm going to jump the gun a little bit, is the ending, because it is a big wet fart at the end. To be very blunt, it's the problem is the and it affects Blackheart a lot because I thought Blackheart's intimidating. Like they give him a good enough power to make him intimidating and stuff, and his goons are good too, the fallen angels. But the problem comes into Blackheart is at the end is he gets and the Penance Stare is a big thing in the comics with Ghost Rider, but the problem is Ghost Rider defeats all the other minions through, kick-ass with his kick-ass powers. And then the big thing with Blackheart is that he can't use those powers on he can use those powers. Johnny Blaze can use those powers, but the problem is that when he gets his objective, then that suddenly means, oh, okay, well then I can beat you now. And you're like, what? Like it becomes it's such a really bad ending. It's so anticlimactic because you're just like, oh, so you're telling me if the villain didn't achieve his goal, then the villain would have won. And it's a backwards thing to do. And I felt like that was a prime example of like, all right, we kind of used the rest of our budget, so we're gonna need to like. And I think that's what Blackheart suffers in general is it feels like they were trying to not waste their money too much because they were going to use it all on the Ghost Rider effect. So they were like, okay, we're going to have to cut costs, and that's like, let's make Blackheart human instead of having him be a demon, and stuff. So stuff like that, I think, is the reason why. And so because of that, like, I think, especially with comic books, a lot of how a comic book villain memorability, how memorable they are, comes into their fights with the main hero. I can think of like stuff like Thanos. I can think stuff like like Mysterio has had cool fights. Green Goblin has had great fights. Doc Ock has had some good fights. It helps the villains be more memorable when they have their big fight with the hero, and so when Blackheart's fight is very mundane, he doesn't become that interesting of a character.
Well, but just to point this out, all the villains that you've mentioned are in the latter MCU world, whereas this one's in the early versions where you have the villains like Galactus and Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, which really isn't Galactus but a big cloud. And people don't remember that, or they really, really hate that. Whereas the upcoming Fantastic Four First Steps is actually going to show the real Galactus. Generally, the filmmakers making these never really know just how many fans are going to watch these films versus general audiences. And I'm sure the backlash for Fantastic Four and this one, because of the fact that Blackheart isn't in his more demon form, which is most of the comic book. To be honest with you, I can't even remember when I was reading it if he ever used a human form, because he's such a cool character, not as a human form. And he was one of Ghost Rider's main villains. Don't get me wrong. But
originally, the main villain was actually going to be Scarecrow. Not to be confused with DC's villain Scarecrow, but the villain Scarecrow was going to be the original villain, but they obviously did not use that character because of the fact that everyone associates the Scarecrow name with DC.
Yeah, well, then they used the three minor characters who were off pretty easily. Wallow, Abador, I had them written down.
And Grizzly.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't even remember those characters in the comic book. I'm sure they're in there. I don't remember them at all. Because Blackheart was a cool character by himself, but in order for Ghost Rider to have the villains to defeat, they had to give him some cannon fodder, and that's what these three characters are. The cannon fodder. They're easy people that he can defeat. The first one doesn't even last past the first fight.
But I will say, with that in mind, this goes into the reason I enjoy this movie. I think the Ghost Rider, the way they did Ghost Rider with the effects and with the fight overall was fantastic. Like I think even today the effects actually do hold up fairly well. From just the transformation. I mean, the first scene is of Nicolas Cage transforming into Ghost Rider is done really well. And again, even like the scenes of him like riding on the side of the building, I still think look great today. It honestly looks better than some of the other Ghost Rider interpretations we've seen live action wise past that.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Ghost Rider that they did in Agents of Shield. Too many episodes for me, so I never got around to watching it. I heard it was good. I just never got around to it.
It's done fairly well and stuff. But I will say it's the transformation again for me. I still remember the first scene of Nicolas Cage transforming to Ghost Rider in this movie more than any other transformation, first time transformations. The rest of them they're kind of like okay, but like again the first transformation scene in this movie was done phenomenally.
Well, yeah, because it's supposed to be fucking painful, and you see that pain in Nicolas Cage. It's like watching the transformation of the first werewolf transformation in American Werewolf of London. It's painful. You're watching. It's not a good thing. It's a painful thing. Which brings up the one thing the one thing I did hate about the movie is that by the end of the movie, you had Nicolas Cage being able to control his transformation with Ghost Rider, which when I was reading the comic books, he never could do really. So it seems odd to me that he was able to, within the span of like a day or two, be able to control that just simply by reading these books that taught him how to channel that. I thought it was weird the first time I saw the movie, and then I thought it was even more weird when they bring it up and when I rewatched the movie that he's been reading these books for years, and all of a sudden he can channel the demon and I find it fucking hilarious. I think that was just a means for him not to replicate or be replicated like the Hulk character, which is all rage.
Yeah.
I think
because now in modern Ghost Rider, usually the Ghost Rider, whoever's the Ghost Rider, does usually have a control to be able to flip that switch. But yeah, it's one of those things of stereotypical movie logic where it's like, well, we need our main character to be able to transform when we need the plot to do it. So we're gonna say, oh, he magically now has the ability to just transform when he wants to. I mean, it's a very common movie trope, so that didn't bother me personally too much.
It only bothers me because I like the way when Sam Elliott's character does it more so than when Nicolas Cage do. And as we're getting on the subject of Sam Elliott's the caretaker, something Slade is his name. I can't remember his name.
Carter Slade.
Carter Slade.
Which everything with I love Sam Elliott and having the talk about perfect casting. He was perfect casting.
He was perfect casting, and he was channeling that storytelling aspect at the very beginning of this movie that he did for like the Big Lebowski, and I fucking loved him in this movie. So this movie is elevated because of him.
Yeah,
Donald Logue, but not much else for me. Because I still love I love both of those actors in this movie. And the fact that he's just in the background until that very end, where the last act where he transforms into the Ghost Rider, and we see him riding alongside Nicolas Cage.
Another great scene, great moment.
It's a great scene. It's a great scene. It just sucks that he just rides off into the sunset.
I know he gets like a. All right, sorry, we don't have the budget to have two Ghost Riders on screen for too long, so I've gotta ride off to be away from the plot. Because yes, again, the third act is the weakest in the whole movie because it felt very much like, okay, we gotta cut. We already used our budget. We show Ghost Rider fighting the minions. That's as much as we're gonna get out of our budget. We're gonna have to again, like, because you have the time where he's like he loses his powers, so he's not actually able to transform. So he has to, but he can transform the gun at least. So so that way again, you can see moments where like, yeah, they probably did this to save money on the budget and stuff.
Well, I'm curious. Do you have in front of you what the budget was for this?
Yes, it was 110 million.
Was it really that much?
Yeah.
Jesus.
But you have to imagine like Nicolas Cage probably took a lot of that money, because he's Nicolas Cage, so he probably got paid a good chunk. And then probably the effects were probably very expensive at the time because, back in 2007 when the movie came out, it wasn't there wasn't CGI wasn't as big and as easy accessible as it is nowadays. It still was pretty costly back then.
Do you have the figures for how much it made worldwide?
228.7 million. So it definitely made its budget back.
Well, yeah, I knew it was successful. That's why they made a second one. The really, really bad second one.
Very bad second.
Because
that one also was a financial success, sadly enough. But
because they had Neville Dean, the guys who did what was it, the weird fucking Jason Statham movies, Crank.
Yeah,
fuck, I hated those movies. And then they had them do this one, and it's even more manic depressive to watch that movie. And that movie has fucking Idris Elba in it.
Oh yeah, and it's funny too because the CGI in that movie is honestly not as good as the first movie, which is crazy. I think the first Ghost Rider effects look better in this movie than it does in a sequel.
Well, I guess one day we'll have to get around to doing an episode on Spirits of Vengeance. But
I have a lot of opinions of Spirit of Vengeance. But going back to these, with the original stuff, talking about another casting choice, I'm curious what your feelings on it. I actually like Peter Fonda as Mephisto. I thought he did a good job, like way better than the Mephisto we got in the sequel.
Mm-hmm. No, I think Peter Fonda. I have some great opinions on Peter Fonda. I think he's a phenomenal actor. He's done some phenomenal fucking films, and I think that was a coup for the film to get him to play this character. I think he did a really good job. And that's one of the things, like I said, when I rewatched the film, there are certain aspects of the film that I do like. I have only seen this movie 3 times. Once it originally came out, then right before Spirit of Vengeance came out, and then now. And the fact that, like I said, Nicolas Cage was channeling Elvis Presley always turned me off of the film. So every scene that he was in, just, but watching the effects for Ghost Rider, I always thought were good, and they're still good. As you have already pointed out, they are still good. They still hold up extremely well. And some of the stunts are really cool. Like I said, when he rides along the side of the building, I think that even though it makes me channel the scene from Batman when the Batmobile does the same thing, it still looks cooler with Ghost Rider doing it. I made note of that. It's like, it's a little cooler for Ghost Rider. Or when Ghost Rider is on the bridge and then he just sees all the cops and says, fuck you cops, and he goes down the bridge and into the water. There's some really cool sequences in this film as opposed to the director's previous film, which was Daredevil. I don't remember anything in Daredevil that I liked other than watching Jennifer Garner as Elektra. And that's the thing most people didn't like, is that version of Elektra.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This definitely out of the two, I definitely enjoyed this more than Daredevil. But yeah, no, I think and with the MCU, who knows? I definitely want another modern interpretation. I mean, I like the Robbie Ramos they had for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I thought the actor did good, and I like that. I would love to get another Ghost Rider in modern MCU. I know there's been rumors about Norman Reedus, who I think would be a fantastic Johnny Blaze if that ends up being actual true thing. But
I don't think you should ever go back to Johnny Blaze. I think the whole Johnny Blaze story is not one that works unless you're trying to do, unless you do a period version, like say they do something similar to what they did with Fantastic Four First Steps, I don't think the Ghost Rider with Johnny Blaze works that well because they'd have to modernize it too much and not have him be like a carnival performer, and it wouldn't be Johnny Blaze anymore. I think the only way to do that is to do Johnny Blaze what they did in the 90s, where he's grizzled, older, he's gone through the whole Ghost Rider thing, and you play that as like everything that Johnny Blaze was when he was Ghost Rider in the past. I don't want to see him in, like I think Norman Reedus would be a really good Blaze character, and not so much the original Johnny Blaze. So if they were to do a Midnight Suns and they have Ghost Rider and they have Blaze, I think he'd be a cool ass Blaze and not so much a Ghost Rider. But I think they lucked out with the whole stunt driving thing for Nicolas Cage and Johnny Blaze thing for this one. And I don't think they could go back to that. It just seems hokey. Mm-hmm. And it was hokey the way Nicolas Cage played the character. I think that the guy, the kid who played the younger version, did a much better job. And that just makes me want to see a Danny Ketch one, who was more of a teenager / 20-something, as opposed to an older guy. I did not read any of the newer versions. I know that the Danny Ketch character is dead, and of course, the Ghost Rider is passed on to multiple different people over time. But
I think right now you have to. I think Robbie would be the. See, it's the modern version. It's the Miles Morales. It's the more modern version that who has a really interesting story. I think the reason for me why Johnny works is his origin story does work really well. He's got a very good origin story about trying to save his dad but making a deal with the devil. And so I understood when they did the Ghost Rider, because Danny Ketch is okay, like when he's actually there, but when you get to his actual like origin story, it's okay, but it is very convoluted, a little bit convoluted compared to Johnny Blaze, which is very clear cut of he makes a deal with the devil to save his dad. The devil screws him over, kills his dad anyway, and then he's stuck being the Ghost Rider.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but also keep in mind, I can't remember when Ghost Rider, I had just had it up too, when Ghost Rider was originally conceived, and it was all very simplified stories.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I didn't care for the original Johnny Blaze. I didn't really care for the stories that originated with the Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider. I didn't like them. I didn't find them all that interesting, but then that's why I don't like going back to reading a lot of the older Marvel comics. I could understand their place in the history of the Marvel cinematic, the Marvel comic book world. I just don't really care to go back too far to explore those very simplified stories. I like my shit to be a little bit more convoluted and complex and much more interesting, which is why I don't read comic books or superhero comic books anymore. For everyone out there who's listening, I'm not one of those fanboys who actually watches all of the shows now or anything like that, because I stopped kind of reading a lot of the superhero stuff about 2 decades ago. So I am not up to date with any of the current versions for most of the cinematic versions of these characters. Mine comes from the late 80s to early 90s, and then it kind of stops. So that being said, I had, in the 90s, characters were darker. They had a lot more issues. That's when we had, Todd McFarlane doing Spider-Man before he went off to do Spawn, which we're going to talk later this month about, actually. And then, you had a lot of these more complicated characters who had a lot of issues. Those are the ones I liked. The ones before that, they didn't have so many issues. Oh, Spider-Man was an adolescent, and he had adolescent issues. And that's pretty much what he had for most of the Steve Ditko and Stan Lee versions. I tried reading those. I really couldn't get into them. So I can admire their place in the history of the character. That doesn't mean I'm going to like them. And I would not like to see that as a cinematic version. Ghost Rider is lucks out because it's got so many cool aspects to it, but it's also kind of limited by some of the comic book aspects of it. Because this movie is a bona fide, it is a comic book brought to life as a movie, not designed to be linked to some cinematic universe. It is a standalone comic book movie before people started to link movies with other movies. It's self-contained. It is a complete story from beginning to end, and then it leaves the door open if they want to have more adventures. And that's what it is. And it plays like a comic book, a PG-13 comic book that kids can enjoy. That's what you get. It does its job really well. It doesn't do a bad job, not like the Catwoman movie with Halle Berry, which there are some people who like that movie. I know there's some people who like that movie, but this one plays like a comic book. Before MCU decided to make everything an interconnected universe, this one plays like a comic book. It is not the Dolph Lundgren Punisher. Okay. Oh shit! All right, what else do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely it's funny because even Nicolas Cage admitted himself that this movie should have been rated R, and I think it would have been I think there's some things they could have done to do that. Mostly again with Nicholas portrayal of Johnny Blaze. I'm wondering if the movie was rated R, would Nicolas Cage have maybe stepped away from some of the weirdness he did with like the jelly beans, or would he still have done that? I mean, this is a point. This is actually one of those movies. I can see maybe what they could have done to make it a little bit more rated R, but it's not, other than again Nicolas Cage's portrayal of Johnny Blaze. There's not a lot to this movie that I'm like, oh yeah, they could have, if they were rated R, they would. It's not like the Venom movies where like with the Venom movies, oh, I can see what the movies would have been if they had made it a rated R versus PG-13. But Ghost Rider, I don't think there's a lot much different other than Nicolas Cage's portrayal of Johnny Blaze that would have really made it worth a rated R.
No, the director did not go out to make a rated R film. Yeah. The relationship between Roxanne, Eva Mendes, and Nicolas Cage's Johnny Blaze is very much a PG love story.
Yeah,
it is not this weirdly complicated. He flirts, he loves, he flirts on a motorcycle as he chases her down, doing little tricks and stuff. Their relationship does not come off as being anything risque. We all know from the very get-go, he loves her, she loves him, and that's about their relationship. It's very simplified, which is good because, to be honest with you, for this film, audiences don't really care that much about that.
Yeah,
you go.
And we didn't talk about her a lot, but I liked Eva Mendes. The only problem with her is she's just not given a lot. At the end of the day, she could have been given a lot more. She does get kind of sidelined after a point. But I mean, she's fine.
I love Eva Mendes. This film does give her nothing to do other than look hot and be the love interest for Johnny Blaze. Now, that being said, unfortunately, most of the superhero movies for a long time, and this includes the MCU's movies, for a long time, the female love interest doesn't do much of anything other than be put in peril and has to be saved. It is very rare that does not happen, which is sad because that just means that we have very weak female characters. Unfortunately, that was my big problem with the Doctor Strange movie. They hired Rachel McAdams, and she does nothing in that first movie. Literally, she's like window dressing for Benedict Cumberbatch. I was like, really? You have this amazing actress in this movie, and she's window dressing for you. They give her more in the second movie, but that first movie, she does nothing. And that was a problem with, even Natalie Portman in the first Thor movie. window dressing. They give her more in the second movie, which people tend to hate more in that one than they do in this first movie. I mean, it's the thing that's a problem with most of these superhero movies, unless you decide to make them the hero or give them their own movie, like Halle Berry and Catwoman, or Jennifer Garner and Elektra, which then doesn't appeal to the fanboys, and therefore they don't get looked upon very kindly, which is another unfortunate thing. You just can't win. Only because I can only think of Wonder Woman being the only successful female-led superhero movie that I can think of right now.
Black Widow's kind of hard to say because it came out during COVID, so
yeah,
it's hard with that one.
Black Widow also, has this weird thing. It kind of came and went, and it was this movie that, out of all the MCU films, it was placed in a weird position, and so it just isn't talked about that much.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, but I also enjoyed all the supporting cast in that one. So, but those, getting back to Ghost Rider, I mean, it feels like a comic book, in which you can't say for a lot of the early comic book movies. I mean, even the X-Men movies don't really feel like an X-Men comic book. If you're an X-Men comic book fan, the one thing that the movies did horribly wrong is the fact that Scott Summers, Cyclops, is the main X-Men. It's not Wolverine, yet the movies always portrayed Wolverine as being the main character, which is why those films never felt right to me. I give it a little leeway for the second one because the second movie was awesome. But this movie does feel like a comic book. Like, it's what Punisher Warzone does really well. Punisher Warzone feels like a Punisher comic book. The other two Punisher movies that came before do not feel like the Punisher comic book. I mean, even the Punisher, the Netflix show, The Punisher, never doesn't feel like the Punisher comic book. If you've ever read the Punisher comic book, the Netflix show is amazing, but it doesn't feel like the Punisher comic book. Punisher Warzone is the only one that actually, in my opinion, feels like the Punisher comic book. And that's rare. Blade is probably another one that feels like a comic book movie. Well, at least the first one does. Second one feels like a horror movie. We should probably talk about the second Blade.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Going off that then, is there anything else you'd like to say about Ghost Rider, the first Ghost Rider? Because I want to make sure that we touched upon everybody and everything, and touched upon Eva Mendes, who I think gets overlooked in this film, like most female actors who are playing a love interest in these superhero movies. So,
yeah, good with final thoughts of the Ghost Rider is, again, it's I like it. I understand people's complaints with it, but I do, again, I think everything with again, the way the effects with Ghost Rider still hold up very well. There's a lot of great iconic kind of action pieces, minus the ending. I think the movie would have been more successful with Nicolas Cage being replaced. And I think a better final fight, final third act would have raised it above to be more memorable for people. But for what it is, I still think it's a decent superhero flick for a character that doesn't get a lot of love a lot of the time. So, I mean, the fact that it was able to get a theatrical release like that was great, and hopefully we get that again in the future.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that with Ghost Rider, it's actually holds up better than you would think. It's I will say this, that the original Punisher with Dolph Lundgren and even the one with the second Punisher movie with oh my god, I can't even think of his name now. But the second Punisher movie don't hold up really well at all. But this one still holds up as a comic book movie. Because of the fact that it delved deep into its comic book roots and brought those out. special effects still hold up really well, and even with the Elvis Presley interpretation that Nicolas Cage gives, it gives it that carnival kind of outlook, that carnival feel to it. Even if he is chomping down on jelly beans in the wine glass, the horror elements in this film obviously stem from the fact of the devil, and Nicolas Cage makes a devil on the crossroads, which is a very, very famous trope where people make a deal with the devil on the crossroads and it changes their lives, not always for the best. But those are elements that thankfully get played down for a PG-13 rating for a film to appeal to the younger audience members. I do think that the film as made is perfectly suited for a PG-13 audience. Could they have done a rated R version? Probably. Did they need to do one? No, because at the time this movie came out, most people other than comic book fans didn't know who the fuck Ghost Rider was. It was a good way to introduce characters to Ghost Rider. Now, would you want an R-rated Ghost Rider movie now? Oh, hell yes. Hell yes. You want to see what the heck they could really do. But would it play as well? Who knows? Every movie out there, it won't play as well as Deadpool. Deadpool is a self-referential movie that makes fun of everything. Ghost Rider really doesn't make fun of everything. It is a hardcore R, probably depressing as shit, talking about the devil and someone who makes a deal with the devil in the crossroads. Rated R material, that's going to be hard sell to mainstream audiences, especially with the visual effects that are needed to create the Ghost Rider. So everyone used to fault this movie for not being rated R. I'm like, dude, no one knew who the fuck Ghost Rider was. I'm okay with them doing this. This isn't, we've had 3 Punisher movies with varying degrees of success. Actually, I don't think any of them were really all that successful. You could do it now with John Bernthal, who is playing him in the Netflix/Disney Plus series, and you probably would have a really successful movie. But that's with 2 years of his own series, and then being in Daredevil for a whole season and showing up in the current season of Daredevil. There's a lot of leeway with that. I would really hope that people take a second look at some of these early Marvel interpretations, like Ghost Rider, Blade, the original Punisher, not the Dolph Lundgren one, the one that came in between. Even if you take a look at the original Hellboy by Guillermo del Toro versus the current Hellboy with I don't even know who plays the current one in the Crooked Man, but you see the difference between the quality and the execution between those early movies where comic books weren't like second nature to audiences, as opposed to now where we have the cinematic universes of DC and Marvel taking up a lot of theaters throughout the whole year. I think Ghost Rider was a decently put together movie with some thought when it originally came out. There was nothing like it at the time. You could have easily just done another easy character like Daredevil was. But no, they decided to do Ghost Rider. Nowadays, doing a decision like that would be like doing Guardians of the Galaxy, another team of people that no one had a clue about, and gambling on that. So with that, we're going to rate the movie. What did you give the movie Ghost Rider? Now we're going to rate it from 1 star to 5 stars, 1 star being bad, 5 stars being excellent. What do you think this movie should be rated, Mr. Phillip?
For me, it's a 3. Like it's a 3.5. Because there's a lot of things I do like. If I was cheating, I would do like a 3.5 out of 5. To be honest. Because there's a lot of things I like, but again, it does suffer a little bit from Nicolas Cage for the first half of the movie, and again, the third act does suffer a lot as well.
I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars, mostly because if I was still going with my original interpretation of this movie, it'd probably have a 1.5. So I give it a full star above that, because upon rewatching it and putting it in the context of everything that has been made since then, this is one of the earlier versions of a comic book movie, in my opinion, that feels like a comic book, which was rare because everyone was trying to not be a comic book. You take these comic book characters, but you don't want to be a comic book. I always thought that was weird. Even with Ang Lee's Hulk, I thought that was weird. You want to do a Hulk movie, but you don't want it to feel like a comic book. You want it to feel like a serious drama with some issues, which you could put in there. But imagine if Ang Lee, one of the most celebrated directors out there, had decided to embrace the comic book of Hulk and embedded his movie with that. What a grand film that would have been. I think it would have been a magnificent film, and it wouldn't have been hampered by shitty ass CGI at the last third of the movie, like so many other comic book movies were hampered back in the day. I say that back in the day, but even nowadays with Marvel Cinematic Universe and DC, they tend to overindulge in that third act, and that third act can either make or break even modern day comic book movies. So with that, I want to thank you, Philip, for joining us on this special month of comic book focused horror movies. Ghost Rider. I want to thank everyone for joining us on this special episode. If you enjoyed this, make sure to check out some of the other comic book infused horror films out there that we're going to be highlighting this month. Also, make sure to check out our regular episodes that are released every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, and YouTube. With that, thank you for joining us on Conversation from Horror, Conversations in Horror from all of us here at Something Wicked Entertainment. Thank you and have a great day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.